Hey everyone! I recently did a live stream with Swisspreneur, and there was one question that we didn't get to during the stream that I want to pick up because I think it's an important one. The question is, when do VCs, venture capitalists, see a return on their investments? In general, I can say venture capital investments are a very long-term game. And it can also be a very emotional journey. Why? Because you typically see your negative returns way before you see your positive returns. Why is that? Because typically 2 to 3 years after we first invest is when we see first companies fail. Failure could mean they go into bankruptcy, they've used up all their money and they're not able to dissolve or continue business. Or it could also mean they stop growing and they just do not become a venture case like we originally predicted. So that means we have to endure all these losses and negative returns while we still wait for our positive returns. So back to positive returns. When do they happen? What types are there? There's accounting/book returns, and then there's cash returns. First, cash and book returns, what are they? It basically means that a later investor comes in and buys new shares from the company at a higher price than what I've paid originally for my shares in the company. Sometimes this might be an increase of 50%, sometimes it might be 3 or 4x, depending on how well the company has been doing and growing. Why do I point out the difference though? Because it doesn't necessarily mean I could now trade in my shares for cash. Typically a new investor that comes in wants to see their cash deployed towards the growth and the future of the company and not towards earlier investors in the company. So even though my shares have now increased in value, I can't really trade them in against cash anywhere. And then there's the second type of returns, cash returns. This means I'm able to sell my shares and get hard cash in return for it. When do those happen? Typically in one of two events, when either a company gets sold to another company or when the company decides to go public and the shares start to trade. Now, when does this happen? Of course, there's exceptions, but we calculate with roughly 8 to 10 years, so almost a decade on average for each and every one of our investments until that happens. So in summary, we see our losses pretty quickly, usually within 2 to 3 years after we've invested. We see our cash returns after about 8 to 10 years, almost a decade later. Of course, there's exceptions, but in general, the rule is you've got to stomach your losses in order to reap your rewards down the road. I hope that was helpful, and with that, have a beautiful day, stay curious, and I'll talk to you soon. Hey, if you like this video and you would like to do me a huge favor, then please smash that like button and subscribe. That's great for the YouTube algorithm and more people will see it. It will also make sure you will get to see all the upcoming videos on essentialism and entrepreneurship. And if there's a question or topic you would like me to cover, please let me know in the comments.